Hello, everybody. Welcome to Talk Openly. My name is Jack, and I'm here with my great friend Daniel.
Howdy. Hi, Jack. Good to see you.
Howdy, howdy. Great to see you.
Good to be on
Yeah,
the line with everybody here on Talk Openly.
yeah, yeah. I feel like I'm still getting reverberation, reverb from our talk last Tuesday with Marie.
Oh, yeah.
And the talk about Tonglen. That was just so much fun and so impacting. Tonglen is just such a cool practice.
Me too. It really jazzed me up because even though I love Tonglen, I hadn't actually incorporated it into regular practice. It was more sporadic. And it was really cool. I got to go on Friday to do Tonglen with Marie. And it was a nice group of people who had never done it before who were there with us. And it was lovely. It was so beautiful. It was such a intimate experience. It's weird to have an intimate experience like that online, right? Um, it was really, I don't know, I felt like it was really impactful. And so, I've actually incorporated it into my daily meditation practice. So it's kind of cool. One of the things, I don't know if I already told you this or not, but I'm going to tell you anyway.
Yeah.
So one of the things that had happened was that my meditation practices, I'd run into this sort of obstacle where I started getting really sort of high energy, like I need, like something needs to happen towards the end of my sits, right? Like I would like all of a sudden just be like, oh, it must be almost time because I can feel it. Like I gotta like not like so much like I gotta get up, but like something had to give, right? My mind couldn't quite be concentrated. And so what I did is I incorporated Tonglen. I just took that as my sign to switch from shamatha practice to Tonglen. And what's really cool is that I ended up having to actually bump my time up in order to because the
All
Tonglen was
right.
so good, like I ended up bumping up the amount of time that I sit, and it's gorgeous. Like it doesn't stop amazing me, that practice. And so I'm really grateful,
Yeah.
that I kind of got kicked into another level of meditation by bringing Tonglen into it regularly.
Isn't that cool? Yeah, where it's like you find a new, just a new part of the practice that's like engaging in a different way. And it's not that it's better than any other practice, right? It's just like, oh, this really deepens everything. I love that. Yeah, and it sounds cool that you're like, starting out with shamatha, so like single pointed focus, really developing that concentration, and then you're taking whatever energy is happening at the end of that and really putting it into like that visualization where you're sending the positive bodhicitta back at others, and that just seems really potent.
Yeah. And one of the things that I love about it is that I actually don't make up my mind anytime in advance about like who I'm going to do Tonglen with or for.
Mm.
Even if it pops up. So like sometimes like in the beginning part of my sit, my mind will wander a little bit like, I wonder who I'm gonna, who I'm gonna be doing Tonglen for today. But then I just like, oh, come back. And then I don't decide until it's time. And so it's kind of cool to see who shows up as me feeling like it'd be good to connect with them in that way. So it's been really quite meaningful. I love it. Thank you, Marie. So
Yeah,
good. Yeah.
that's great.
What about you? How's your practice going, Jack?
Yeah, my practice, I mean, as far as meditation, I've like picked up my training time over the last like month or two, and I really sense, um I guess that I've entered like a new level of my training, which is really cool. It feels like, like leveling up a little bit, if there is such a thing. Um, and one thing that's great, that's just a really simple change, is that like I don't really feel, well, sometimes, but I don't feel the need all the time to be like checking what time is it, or like guessing like how long has it been that I've been sitting. um which is a huge change for me. Like starting out doing, single pointed meditation, it was, it is, and it especially was so hard because my attention span is not great. Um, and so it's really, really helped to train my mind, and just like, no matter how crazy my mind is, I'm still just gonna sit here and try as best as I can to come back to my breathing. And man, there have been times where, I mean, it's almost like I'm like a kindergartner with ADHD, and I'm just
Oh, yeah.
like wriggling on the carpet, like I gotta get out of here. but um, but that's really started to shift for me, and so that's really cool. It's cool to see how like our minds really can change. They're not stuck. They're
No.
not permanent. We can change them. It's so cool. Um, but one kind of funny thing that I noticed today in terms of like my everyday life practice. So, not the sitting on the cushion, which is kind of like, we're going to the gym, we're lifting weights. Whereas, in my everyday life practice, that's where I'm, using my strength to do practical things, right? I like that metaphor. And so I noticed in my life practice, I just have this idea in my mind that someday out there in the, beyond in my future, I'm going to have a commute, and I'm going to have a job where I don't feel stressed and I just feel like blissfully, happy and content. And it came to me today just how insane that is. To believe that that is like anywhere on the horizon. And I think that is because the realization, or whatever, the insight that I had, is because I've been doing a lot more analytical kind of meditation on just like the first teaching of the Buddha, which is simply that, the nature of this world is suffering. And
Yeah.
so the very nature of everything that we engage with is like in some way kind of shitty. And so trying to argue with that or bargain with it and be like, like, okay, there's going to be some day where I feel happy and like content and at ease within like this world, right? um and if I really think about it and think like, well, the nature of it is that it's unsatisfactory, maybe not like massive suffering all the time, but just kind of unsatisfactory,
Yeah.
the type of
Right.
stuff where it's like, oh man, like traffic's going slow today, or like,
Yeah.
someone didn't say hi to me, those types of just like little slights of the day that happen all the time. um that's just life. That is what it is. um and so I can see this glimmer of kind of like, oh, that's what liberation actually is to accept that that's the nature, you know, and to know that that's not where I'm going to find happiness. Actually, true happiness lies in that acceptance um and not resisting the reality. And so that was really cool. It was like, all right, I don't I can work towards not having that burden of like one day happiness within samsara,
Right.
Um, so this is
That's what
really
keeps the
interesting.
wheel spinning. That's the hamster wheel.
The hamster wheel, yeah, 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 for sure.
Trying to get what you think you want, and then getting it and being like, that's not even what I want.
Yeah. Well, that's the funny thing. I was thinking today, I was like, a year and a half ago, I started this job at Harborview Medical Center, and I was like so excited, like super pumped up, like thinking how like, oh man, I could really make a career here with the University of Washington, and like this is going to be my life. I love Seattle. And then like a year and a half later, I'm like, I can't do this shit anymore.
Right, right.
So it's just the roller coaster. And if I can find a way to, you know stop the roller coaster and get off and just be able to look at it for what it is, like that's freedom.
Yeah, yeah.
And that just seems like, yeah, I want to get there, and I believe that it's possible.
I'm reminded actually, you know, that form of radical acceptance that you're talking about, that's at the heart of all of this. It reminds me of Tara Brach. You know, she talks about, you know, acceptance and commitment therapy, right? Or
Yeah.
and it's interesting because that first part, that radical acceptance, like you are talking about, it's not. You know, some people might hear that and they might be like, "Well, wait a second. You mean you're just going to be okay with things being crappy?" Like
Hmm.
things not being satisfactory, you're not going to move towards things that are better. That's not it at all. In
Right.
fact, that radical acceptance is a form of freedom that allows you to actually open up and see much greater possibilities. You can see other opportunities. So like when you're locked into something like, well, I must, you know, not have a commute, and I must have colleagues who respect me, and I must have blah blah blah, whatever that is on your list of requirements, right?
Yeah.
That's very narrow. It's very narrow, right? Like and so like it's really hard to hit that target and to be satisfied when you hit it,
Totally.
right? But when you open up and you're like, oh, that's just how it is. I see. Like it's all kind of suffering, but that doesn't mean I'm stuck. In fact, I'm
Yeah.
free, right? And so it's this like really radical form of freedom as well that really opens us up to possibilities and opportunities that we might otherwise miss out on with that super narrow, tight focus.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. Yeah. And it's just such a cool paradox, right? Because you would think that, if we just went for what we thought would make us happy, then we'd be happy. But actually we're just kind of chasing our tails. And so yeah, that freedom from that chasing and just an acceptance of what's happening can really bring some real joy, like, oh, I can actually see it for what it
Yeah,
is,
yeah,
and accept people for who they are right now, and totally understand the fact that change is in our nature too. And so I can change myself, I can change my situation, I can change my mind, and people who I, find annoying or, shitty for not saying hi, they can change too. And they're not stuck in that place either. Oh my God.
yeah. But I can't imagine all the benefits that you've received from various quote unquote teachers on the ferry ride to work, right? Like I just can't imagine.
Yeah.
Like, come on, those are transformative agents of change in your life, and it would make me sort of sad to think of you not having to put up with all that nonsense.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure I'll have plenty of other nonsense to put up with wherever I go. Oh man. Well, Daniel, we are going to be talking about the topic of aging tonight.
Yay!
Yay. And you know, we were talking this last week, and you had mentioned that you've been thinking about this topic recently, and thinking about death. And I'm just curious what led you to be thinking about this.
Well, I'm sort of a morbid guy, you know, and I tend to dwell on this kind of stuff. I've actually found it quite useful. But no, it's not just that. Um, an old family friend who is, I think, a little bit younger than me or right around my age, um, had a incident that, you know, basically they're now on their deathbed,
Mm,
and you know, had some type of a um, brain hemorrhaging sort of situation, ended up in a coma. We don't know the status now, but exactly, there seems to be some indication of some improvement, whatever that means.
mm,
But it was pretty big deal, you know, and really brought to mind this sort of like, oh man, that's right. Like this isn't going to last forever, you know? And like we talk about it all. It's easy. That's one of the reasons I think about it a lot, right? Like part of, you know, what I've read anyway, the instructions is to keep death and our own mortality at the forefront of our minds. And so I do actually try to do that, but there's just times where it's more pronounced than others, right? When
sure.
people close to us are aging, dying, and you know, like the two, like seeing the deterioration. So another thing is one of my former mother-in-law's. She's got like Alzheimer's and is going through like it's a pretty rough, it's rough, like really rough situation to watch, like what's happening there. It's the, like I don't know what they call that period, but as a person sort of transitions from um, non sort of dementia into like full blown
Hmm.
Alzheimer dementia, and so it's like there's periods of cognizance and awareness of what's going on, and that leads to a lot of um, emotional turbulence, if put it lightly.
Yeah.
And so I actually had this, it was weird. I was out for a walk the other day, and it was kind of a chilly day, and I love myself. I try to get into shorts and a t-shirt as soon as I can. And so, but I wasn't yet there, but I saw that while I was out walking, I saw this woman. She was walking around in shorts, and she was spry. She was like looking at trees and stuff. And I didn't pick, I noticed her. A little bit later, we ended up talking. And I'm like, she was witty and funny and sharp, like very sharp, all of her mental faculties that, just amazing conversation. And and then she tells me she's 80 years old. And
Mm.
I was like, whoa, what? Excuse me? I told her straight up, I was like, I don't believe you. And then she proved it to me that she was 80 years old. And I could have sworn that she was maybe 60, but I couldn't help but like
Wow.
do a little bit of compare and contrast between this person and the other people in my life who are younger but are suffering the deterioration of their body at an earlier state than this woman. So all of this stuff sort of like just made me like really contemplate it, and to think about my own sort of aging process. Yeah, that's what brought it up.
Mm. Well, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, and I'm sorry to hear about your friend. It's really devastating. And and yeah, it's that moment where we feel the impact of what we're all going to feel, at some point, at many points in our lives, when we have to experience that loss or recognition that it's happening. Yeah, I'm wondering, what have you noticed, like, in your mind? What kind of, are you having any different emotional states or just kind of thoughts around this that are shifting for
Yeah,
you?
yeah, I think so. I think that I think what's coming up, it's sort of twofold. There's there is that recognition of loss and change and the amount of pain and suffering that comes along with that. So, thinking of it's just like with dying. I think that the aging or the sort of deterioration of the body mind, it oftentimes I think is worse for people who are witnessing it in a way than it is for the person who's experiencing it. And I
Hmm.
don't mean to minimize the pain and anguish of people's bodies, falling apart, but it does seem like it's more like the people who love them, who care for them, who need them, who depend on them, and the changes that they then are confronted with. That's where like I sense that there's a lot of suffering, and
Hmm.
that it brings up this sort of upwelling of compassion for our shared condition, where I'm like, right. And that's where the Tonglen practice that we were talking about earlier comes in handy, right? Where I can really, I'm like, whoa, right. Like both the person who's going through these process, going through the aging deterioration process, and the people who are impacted by that, and it turns out there's many, right? Like each of us is connected to so many other people. And so like there's on the one hand there's this deep um upwelling of compassion, some empathy, all kind of mixed together, and at the same time there's this gratitude because I recognize, I'm like, yeah, me too, right? Like this is, I'm not going to escape this, right? Like the signs are already here that I'm older, right? I try to ignore my age as much as possible, but but when I look in the mirror, or step on the scale, or don't recover from my run as quickly as I wished, or whatever, then I'm like, oh, right, me too. This is happening here as well. And the gratitude comes from this feeling of like deep, so glad that I found the Dharma, right? Or that, that I came into contact with it at this point, like we were talking about, we don't know when we're going to die or when anything, these bad things are going to affect us. But I'm really glad that I get this sense, like if the sort of average trajectory pans out for me as well, then I'm in a good spot, to make some good use of this time, and if not, if it's happening tomorrow, I'm still really, really grateful, right? That I have some practice and some training that helps me with, it's like, it's on the one hand, it helps me with my own sort of like fears and concerns about loss and all of that. But it also helps me, like I said, to be more connected to the people who are going through it. So, so I'm really, really grateful for that. I'm really like for the practice and for the Dharma, right? Like for all of that. That's what's coming up for me.
It's kind of amazing because like when we really start to tap into the reality of our lives and how we exist in the world, and that it's a very, the relationship between life and death is, there's such a small a small difference between those two, and they're very close together. That actually it brings this kind of emotional presence and awareness that instead of like what used to happen for me, or sometimes still happens, is this fear response around death. And like, so a lot of aversion, right, and rejection, and just like, no, I don't think about that, that's, I don't want to think about that. But actually being able to accept it a little bit and see that, like you said, there's an entire world and universe of beings who have to go through this, that there's just this deep, just sense of compassion. And I feel like kind of coming into presence that happens when I'm able to actually sit with it. Like, we talked maybe a month or so ago about my cat James and how that, this experience of him aging and having like some crisis of his health and whatnot, that I wasn't rejecting anymore the fact that he is going to die, and that actually felt really beautiful. And to know that, okay, there is just a little bit of time we have with each other. And why would I want to bring fear and anxiety and stress into that experience? I think it was Thupten Chodron in one of her many talks, said that, grief in some ways is not necessarily about losing what's happened, but about grieving a future with that person or a pet. That we have this vision of how we want to be in the world with that individual, and to have that lost is so devastating.
They're part of our identity. They're like who we are, right? Like whether it's mother, father, or pet or whatever, like they're part of like who we are.
Right. And so to not have that kind of intertwining that we've had is such a huge blow. But yeah, and I haven't had a lot of loss in my life. I know we've talked about that. But it feels like when that comes, the Dharma is going to be really, really helpful for me. And it doesn't mean, I think what's really important to point out is that not using Dharma to bypass like our emotional experience, right? That like I will still need to grieve my cat, right? Absolutely, but there will be, I guess, just more of an understanding that this is this is what happens, and
Yeah,
this is just the reality of things. And
I'm
it's
really glad
okay.
that you
Yeah.
I'm really glad that you pointed it out, because it's exactly that. It it it's not avoidance, right? So that's my normal strategy, is just sort of stick my head in the sand and like la 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 la. No, I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm okay. That's happening over there. It's not happening to me. No, 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 no. Whatever, like that. That's like a general sort of strategy. But what the Dharma does is, it actually, what we're doing is, as we were talking about earlier, this is radical acceptance, meaning we look right at it, be
Yeah.
present with it, and we're not just like, you know, the show, we're talking about aging, right? Which death is a part of that, but there's a hell of a lot more going on with aging
So
than
much.
just death. I mean, many
Well,
people
that's
sort
our
of are
whole
like,
life, our entire life, all the time, is we're constantly aging
right?
every second. we're not
Every
we're not
single,
going back at all. We're not getting
right?
younger in any way.
The part that kind of gets me is like how, when I was younger, like in like let's just say like late teens, early 20s, good physical shape, and life looks long and bright and all of that good stuff. There was a sort of a disgust for old people, and
Mhm.
aging. And what I thought was old was like 40, you know. Yeah. And I just had this like, ew, like those people are like, they're spent. Look at them. Just look at them. Their bodies tell the story. Their minds are already gone and all of that. Here I'm 45 and I'm like, I'm not, no, 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 that's not
Yeah.
true. But like, it's funny because there's this sense of like, the younger we are, the more that we want to hold on to that youth. I mean, I guess maybe it's not the younger we are. Everybody wants to hold on to youth and beauty and all of those things, right? But it's not lasting. That's for damn sure. And it comes
Yeah.
away. It comes faster than anyone ever expects, right?
Yeah.
Like one day you wake up and you're like, oh crap, I'm 35, I'm 45, I'm 50, whatever it is, right? And I always think it's sort of odd, right? Like that one of the most common refrains that I hear is about people saying like, no, but I feel I'm still that same, I'm still me on the inside. I'm just same as that kid. I'm
Yeah.
not like the inside here looking out, like, yeah, my body's changed, my mind's changed and everything, but the real me, the love, that
Right.
soul, the permanent me, whatever you want to call it, the unchanging me that's looking out, it remains the same. And so there is this sort of like, I don't know what you call it, but there's this difference between the perceived internal state and what's happening sort of in the body, right?
Yeah. Yeah, there's like this unchanging part that doesn't age, and on the inside I'm like still 28, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that is, it's, I think that's also super compounded by, our particular cultures, you know, beliefs and treatment of aging, especially growing up as a female person and getting the kind of messaging around, no, you literally have to anti-age. You need to use like anti-aging creams and like hair products, and everything has to be about maintaining your youth. Um, and man, that's for one, it's completely insane. It's just completely insane. And then the devaluing of aging, and
Yeah.
that, actually what's happening is we're becoming richer in experience and wisdom, and yeah, to put so much emphasis on youth, I think really causes a lot of psychological problems, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I do. But you point at something that I can't help but laugh at, which is this richness that you're talking about. It only is helpful if you can spend it, right? In some sense, right?
Mm,
like so many people think like, if I only could go back to when I was younger, but I could have all the knowledge and wisdom and everything of my experiences. And obviously you can't do that. Second best is to pass it along. Oh, I learned all
right,
this stuff, and we can pass it along to the young people, but they do not want that crap,
right.
right? It's
Well,
outdated, it's
because
old.
yeah,
You don't understand the current world. That's your old ass world, and your
yeah,
geriatric opinion that was stupid to begin with. Why would I want that? And good
right,
for them to reject that crap, right? Like, so I mean, whatever. Yeah, history is important to pay attention to. I get it, but at the same time, I also understand the value, I think, in young people rejecting not just the body minds, but also the knowledge that's been accumulated through experience.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you, and I've definitely been there. But I also think we're majorly losing out, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, I just wonder if like our culture was less fearful of aging, and if things would be different, you know. The way we treat elderly people and just kind of want them to be taken care of and put away, right?
Yeah.
And kind of out of sight a little bit. That yeah, it just I think it really underlines where we are as a culture, as a society, is that we're very fear-based, and we have so much delusion.
Oh my God! But get this, get this. Okay,
Yeah.
so I have you heard all the news about the reversal of aging based upon Harvard studies? It's in the news, been in the news
No,
quite a
no,
bit.
tell me about
Oh,
it.
oh my goodness. Okay, I got to watch an interview with the lead scientist on this study. So they are literally reversing aging.
Hmm.
I know it sounds weird, right? But they demonstrated they're able to age for there is a mouse study like so many other things, right? But they like you can actually watch the mice. You can see these geriatric looking mice. They have gray hair, they have glaucoma, they have all kind they're the neurons are firing like old people's neurons, that kind of stuff. And then they apply some genetic treatment and reverse it. The glaucoma goes away, the mouse can see, the brain becomes nice and lively and active again. And I thought, it was really interesting because the person who was interviewing the lead scientist said something to the effect of like, oh, so this vision of yours is one where we can reverse, aging, all aspects of aging and whatever. And he was like, yeah, like it's not a vision. It's just like, it's not a question of if, it's when. It's like asking the Wright brothers, like, can humans fly? Of course, like we're not there yet, but we will, right? We will be able to. And I couldn't help it. This provoked a thought experiment, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, so first of all, this whole like lifespan thing, trying to, extend it so that we can live longer. Think about it. If we were fruit flies, right? And we only lasted a few days and we all just lasted a few days, we'd be happy. Like if we made it to day 3, we'd be like, hey, yeah, I had a good life. It was all good because everybody around me, that's what's, like, this is what we do. We die at 3 or 4 days or something, right? Similarly, if we were like a Greenland shark that lives like for 500 years or something,
Yeah.
yeah, but we're all kind of the same. If you make it to 475, you're like, yeah, it was a good life. It was all right. So like it's relative. And so I couldn't help but think like, oh, right. Like the natural exploitation of anti-aging technology, it will not reduce samsara. It will create greater, chasms of selfishness and greed. Because what's the point? What's the point in living to 500 years, right? If
Right.
everybody's living to 500 years, right? That's no fun because then everybody's like equal playing field, right? The whole point, the reason you want to live longer and have all your vitality is so you can acquire more,
Right.
do more, be more self, right, than
Right.
anybody else, right? And so I realized I was like, yeah, like it doesn't matter. Like, sure, I actually totally buy into it from like a science perspective.
Sure.
I imagine, sure, yeah, give it time. Like they'll be able to reverse all kinds of issues, right? But until we tackle the core, the ignorance, the aversion, right, and the attachment, until we get to that, um, it's hopeless. It's
Yeah.
utterly, in fact, you're only going to make it worse.
Right. Yeah. How miserable just to
Ugh.
extend just to extend samsaric life. um yeah, and it's so funny because it's like, okay, so you're extending life so that you can just die later. That's it just I don't understand. I mean, I do, right? I do conventionally. It's like, yeah, I want to live a long life. That's absolutely true. But yeah, especially when it's like okay, let's say you're one of the first people to do this, like, to be able to live to like, let's say like 150. Every single person that you've loved at a younger age is going to be dead. You'll make new friends, and they might die. It's just the same thing. You're going
right?
to die.
All your think about how many pets you have to
Oh,
watch,
so many pets.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's no good, man. And the other thing is like the suffering of change, right? Like, okay,
Yeah.
let's just say hypothetically, again, just a thought experiment. Let's just say hypothetically, like, yeah, you're, biologically, you are at the prime of your whatever peak condition, and you're gonna stay there for like 1,000 years, 10,000 years, right?
Yeah.
That's how long, like your lifespan is just like orders of magnitude different than everybody else's. And it's not just how long you live. You have all your brain is functioning, you're on it. You're
Yeah.
you're strong, you got everything. And then you get to build up all that knowledge and experience and, oh my God, acquire wealth, right? And you could do all kinds of things, take advantage of all kinds of people, and it's whatever, all that stuff that people might be into. Well,
Yeah.
everything around you is going to change, right? Everything is going to like, so, oh, great. Now, yeah, you get to witness with the real effects of global warming, right? Oh,
Right.
here comes climate change. Here comes mass migration. Here comes extinction of, okay, you worried about like our pets passing away. What about this great extinction going on, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now you get to witness the rise of some other form of life form, right, that doesn't even care about humans or whatever, right? Like there's suffering involved in that as well. Like,
Yeah.
why would you want that?
Yeah. Yeah. People are masochists,
Dude.
like big
Uh-uh.
time.
And then you even think about it, it's not just like the aging. So like you have like the aging of the body and the mind of the individual, but like you heard like Japan has like the oldest people, right? Like they're
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I think so they're going through, it's a crisis. It's a literal crisis for the country because there's all these old people and they're just getting older and living longer. And there's not a lot of new young people coming in. And so there's economic crisis, there's
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of like psychological issues that are happening as well. And there's no one to like care for them. There's like the whole system is sort of breaking down. They're having to like invent all kinds of robots to take care of them and stuff because there's nobody else there. And I'm like, oh, like even that, like okay, like even if the entire population gets to be older and live longer, there's still a huge downside.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's just kind of unnatural to imagine extending life beyond. And yeah, it really doesn't make much sense for the world that we're living in, where it's like we're already really, really overpopulated in terms of humans.
Yeah.
Like, we've got major housing crises and like food instability and whatnot. And it's like if we don't figure some of that shit out and people continue living longer, like that those crises are going to be even more intense. And so yeah, it just doesn't make much sense,
It doesn't. And
for
then
planet
you
Earth.
okay, so imagine that you get to live 5 billion years. Okay, so like, all
Oh,
right, yeah, let's just extend it 5 billion years. Well, now our sun has turned into, a red dwarf or red giant or whatever the hell they call it. The Earth's gone, Mars is
yeah.
gone, right? Like, all right, now what?
Yeah,
What are you, what are
exactly.
you,
Yeah, now what?
now what are you gonna do, right? Like, yeah. So I kind of love it. Like, that's one aspect of like Buddhism that I absolutely love is how there's these notions of just eternity, infinity, right? Like, and when we're confronted with that and the vast amount of change going on, it forces this like turning back inward and being like, okay, okay, I don't actually want to live 5 billion years. I don't even want to live 10,000 years. Like, okay, this is what I'm working with
Maybe
right now.
500.
Yeah, right. You could be a Greenland shark. Right. Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
right.
500 years.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd want to be a Greenland shark. That sounds kind of miserable. But yeah, that is like something that I've been pondering lately, where in Buddhism they talk about these eons, these ages, these different eras. And when I first started, like reading texts and whatnot, and I really just thought of it as metaphorical, right? Like these kind of different eras where there's, these other Buddhas and whatnot that come into the world. And it's like, okay, well, that's just, it's metaphorical, it's symbolic. We're talking in that kind of realm here. But if we really are talking about there is no beginning, there is no end, then why not? All of these things have happened maybe millions of times. And if I've had millions upon millions of lifetimes, it just kind of makes sense. But yeah, I feel like the aging within right now, where it's like, okay, I can accept that maybe there's eons of time that I've been involved with. But right now, in the very kind of like tiny little moment of time that I'm here, I'm still really frustrated by my own aging process, And so I can think really grand and whatnot, but when I bring it down to like, okay, what's actually happening right here in my body, I still get kind of annoyed, which is so funny. And I don't know if you experience the same thing, but where I'll notice like gray hairs, or I'll notice like kind of spots on my arms where it's like my mom has like these spots, and her mom had, these skin spots. And it's like, wow, we can get so like, I can get so involved in these like larger scales of time. And then it's like, oh yeah, but I'm still a human being on
Yeah,
planet Earth. And
that's
that's
right.
also cool.
Well, I think that's where there can be some real radical acceptance happening. Like yeah, man, I think I'm decently older than you. But I have, I've been balding since I was like 10 years old. So it shows no sign of letting up, right? Like that. And I'm like, oh, right, look at that. Like, yeah, there's more of that. And then I'm like, oh, wow. Like I've always had all kinds of moles and spots. And I'm like, dude, there's even more. But how can I get more blemishes? I already had tons of them. Like, how can I
Yeah.
really another one? Oh God, really?
Yep.
And then I'm like, oh, like the what do they call, like crow's feet or something like that, where your
Totally.
eye, the wrinkles and stuff around your eyes. And I'm like, wow, like that's pretty amazing. And
Yeah.
then, like I'm like, oh, no matter what I do, like coming off the way it used to. It used to just melt right off, and now it doesn't do that anymore, right?
Yeah.
And there's all in my mind, I can't remember all kinds of whatever. There's all these signs of it. And yeah, you're right. I can become, it can sort of catch me where I'm like, oh God, fuck, this is really happening.
Yeah.
God. But then there's this like what actually happened, what I notice is I start to look around, and I witnessed like, oh, look at all these bodies. Just
Yeah.
look at all these bodies, right? Like, so, my habit has been throughout life to look at only the bodies that pleased my eyes,
Yeah.
right? And yeah, so I'd be like, ooh, that's attractive. Oh, wow, But now like there's this really like great sense of appreciation for just bodies, right? Like
Totally.
where I'm just like, yeah, like look at that. That's like cool. I mean, I don't judge like the bodies of like whales or whatever, or animals running
Right.
around. Like I don't, I might notice like a dog is like, looks old or something, but I don't judge it or anything. I still pet it and love it and stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so like I kind of feel that way. It's actually like me getting older and having my own physical aging stuff, whatever, has helped me really have a greater appreciation for all of it. Where on the one hand, I do actually have great joy for like young people who are like fit and have it all going for them, and they're like, yeah, I'm my body, and they're like taking care of it, and putting makeup on or whatever the hell they're doing, right? And I'm just like good, like it makes me happy.
Yeah.
Like I don't have any kind of like, oh, I wish I, no, it's not like that. But I just have this like, right, that's us, that's look, that's an old body, that's a young body,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
I like that. I actually feel like that's a much more again, it's not such a narrowly confined view. It's
Yeah.
more open, it's way more accepting, and it's frankly speaking, far more beautiful.
Far more beautiful. Yeah. I mean, it's such a relief too, to just be like, oh yeah, that's gonna be me. Like
Yeah.
that's gonna be my body. My dad is like super like anti-aging in his own body. Like he's against it. He just
Okay.
patently against it, right? And you know, like he's the kind of guy where he literally went for like 7 years with no cartilage in his hip because he didn't want to get a hip replacement. And he was, you know, like running on it and stuff, like still trying to do his, you know, his routine. And I get it, you know, his whole, like, much of his life was, you know, he's very athletic person. You know, he played football in college and whatnot. And so that was part of his identity, you know, his body, that his body was, yeah, how he received like attention and award and whatnot.
Yeah.
And but I've just seen like how much suffering it's really
Mm.
brought him, how much mental
Mm.
suffering that, yeah, Dad, in fact, you are aging and your body's falling apart and you have wrinkles and no hair. And yeah, you're just rejecting that. You're just over and over and over rejecting you and the natural process of your body. Um, and that's been hard for me to see, you know, and not the aging part, right? Like the
No.
aging part is like, okay, yeah, that's my dad. And
Yeah.
but it's his suffering around it that's just like, oh, that's what's so hard, is because he's going to continue to get old.
Yeah.
In fact, it's just going to progress. And if he doesn't get some kind of like, yeah, just understanding around it that's healthier and more sane, then it's going to be hard in his last years, really hard to just kind of accept his life. And so I'm hoping that that can be something I can support him with. It's just like,
Right.
yeah, this is life. This is what's happening now. I can see where that might open up. But yeah, so I definitely didn't get like a lot of healthy messaging around aging as a kid, and certainly our culture doesn't help.
Dude, I grew
But
up as a Jehovah's Witness. We're told we're going to live forever and ever in a perfect body, our
that's
body.
right.
Yeah.
Dang.
Woohoo.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, as growing up like just basic Christian, like that is the idea, that yeah, you're gonna live forever in some weird cloud in the sky. And um I definitely imagine myself in my body, even though that I don't think that's necessarily what the Christian Bible says, but yeah, some sort
It
of
says
like
whatever you want it to say, Jack.
yeah, yeah. What I imagined was this like angelic version of me living forever as probably like a 12-year-old, which sounds awful.
Oh, oh. Yeah, you're in your angelic form right now.
uh
I can see the halo.
yeah.
But you know, like these kinds of like discussions, even if they're just internal sort of discussions, this type of like contemplating and meditating on impermanence, it does sound, you know, from one point of view, it does seem sort of like morbid, this sort of like, also like why do you have to dwell on that? Doesn't that make you depressed? Doesn't it, you know,
Yeah.
like, no, actually, the more that we
Opposite.
the more that we recognize impermanence, the more that we are able to sort of free ourselves up, right, and to not get so locked in, like you were talking about, like with your dad, like this kind of like, I am this very limited being, this, I'm just this body, I'm just this mind, I'm just whatever, I'm whatever it is, right? At the end of the day, you're just 5 heaps of clinging, right?
Yeah.
Right, that's it, you know, like, yeah, there's not even a you, like there's just this
Yeah.
man, just a bunch of clinging.
Yeah.
Right, and letting
Yeah.
go.
Right.
Go ahead.
I know, it's fascinating. And I when you do like kind of a analysis, like meditation on the different senses, you know, sight and smell and touch and whatnot, it's kind of like it can get kind of weird, right? Because you're like,
Yeah,
is this, am I just a body? Like, what the fuck is going on?
that's
And
right.
like,
Yeah.
um, and it's kind of a trip, because yeah, at the end of the day, like, uh, if we are practicing to realize like, no, inherent permanent self, um, then yeah, in some ways, it's like, it's all these different causes and conditions coming together into this form, and we're continuing that all the time. That's what aging is that we're meeting our form is meeting up with all these different causes and conditions in our environment, and so yeah, it's kind of fascinating and trippy where it's, um if we really really look at it, our constant state is that, we're in flux, and aging,
Yeah.
and yeah, just heaps of experience.
Exactly. I like to
Yeah.
think of it as, have you ever watched those like infinite fractal videos where
Ooh, yeah.
it's kind of trippy, psychedelic sort of, right? Like
Yeah.
it's just like it never ends, but it's fractal. So there's patterns, there's like a relationship, and there's like common elements that continue to show up. They're not the same every time, but there's something to it where you're like, oh, it's like similar. And I oftentimes like I like to watch, don't like, it's not like I do this every day, but it's just the way that I think about like life, including myself, is like, right, there's this like the appearance of a form be there's something there, right? But at no point, unless you like take a snapshot of an instant, at no point is there anything solid. It's always in flux, but it looks like it's there for a while, right? So like if you're looking at these infinite fractals, there'll be a pattern that emerges and it shows up and it sticks around for a little bit. But
Mm-hmm.
even while it's sticking around, it's changing, right? And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
eventually it just keeps changing and changing and changing. And then before you know, you're like, wait, what happened to that thing? It's gone. And now there's something else there.
Yeah. There's a rising, and then like some continuance, and then cessation, and no three of the, like, none of those are permanent. um yeah, it's actually quite beautiful, and um it's it's funny because when I think about, people, or yeah, people in my life, I really do see them as snapshots.
Yeah.
And I think we all do. It's hard not to do that. Where I I thought that my mom was like 43 years old forever, right? Like that was kind of the age
Mine
that
was
she was.
36 forever.
Yeah. And we
Yeah.
just get these kind of like, yep, that's what they are. That's, and it's funny, and so it's so hard to see that process because it is so gradual, sometimes not so gradual, of course, um but yeah, to just kind of like sit in that beauty a little bit, and be okay that it's like, yeah, things are arising, they're here, they're gonna last for a little while, and then they're dissolving,
Including
um
me, including me.
including me.
That's the
Yeah.
part, because I can like when I start to dwell on impermanence, I still sort of like posit myself in it,
Yeah,
right?
tell me more. Yeah, yeah.
I just mean like yeah, I witness like, oh, a rising, and oh yeah, here it comes. There's sticks around and then it goes away. Yeah, yeah. But there's always like I'm I'm still there,
I'm there,
right?
yeah.
Like somehow, like there's that sense of like I-ness there. Then when I think like this too, it's funny because I'll be like, oh yeah, this body, this whatever. But then there's like, like there's notion, for example, of like, but there'll be reincarnations, there'll be rebirths.
So
Of
I'll
what?
still be here.
Of what? I'm still here. Like who's still what? What do you? And I love those. Like when we get into that part, like, and it all just starts to like kind of disentangle and whatever. I love that stuff. Right?
Yeah.
That's the beautiful mystery. But I read or I heard. Actually, there's this YouTube channel that I follow. It's this Buddhist nun who reads non-dual literature from a variety of traditions. But I came upon this one by Longchenpa, that I like. There's a quote. This is from Finding Rest in the Nature of the Mind by Longchenpa. And it's long, but the part that I was listening to is about impermanence. And this quote comes from there, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
This body is the ground of pain and every mental sorrow, a plenteous wellspring of defiled affliction. And yet you garland it with flowers, adorning it with robes and jewels. But though you tend and wait on it with many a tasty gift of food and drink, at last it will not stay, it will decay and leave you. You cherish now the future food of jackal, fox, and graveyard bird. Don't think of it as something permanent and clean, but implement the holy teaching from this moment on.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. And thank you. Are we contemplating our death every day, and why or why not?
Yeah.
And I want to bring this in more in my practice because it is something that I tend to avoid. And I think it is that kind of, what he was sharing there around, what does the body become? It becomes meat that we put in the ground.
That's right.
And,
that's right.
And to not, that I don't have to fear that's just what happens. Yeah. So am I contemplating that every day and not seeing it as just morbid, right? Because I think that's hangover from, kind of like my Christian upbringing.
Yeah, of course.
And so, yeah,
it works
Thanks
both
for that.
ways, right? These contemplations on impermanence, including aging and dying and all of that. I think it works both ways. It reminds me of that old, there's like within like ancient Greek philosophy or whatever, there's a story of the king who had this guy who always, his job was multiple times in the day to whisper in his ear, this too shall pass. And sometimes there'd be some bad crap going on. And he'd be like, oh, this too shall pass. And oh, that feels good. This bad stuff is going to end. Oh, that's nice, right? But then there'd be something really joyous, something fun going on. And he'd be like, this too shall pass. And he'd be like, oh. And that's balance, right? That's balance. We're like, oh, right. None of it's going to last. The good, the bad, none of it is ever going to last. It cannot last. We've never witnessed any of it lasting. Our bodies, all our loved ones, all this stuff, none of it's going to last. And that's freeing.
Yeah. Thank you for that reminder about coming back into balance. That liberation from obsessing over getting what we really, 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 really want in this life and avoiding what we really, really don't want. And just that reminder that, okay, no matter what, it's going to be gone.
Yep.
Yeah.
And even this talk show is going to be gone.
That's right. Yeah. Well, here we are at the end.
This was a good lifespan though. This talk show, we made it all the way to full. Is like a full, complete life of a talk show.
We did. Yeah.
An episode. Our show goes on.
That's right.
It'll be reborn next week at the same time.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. Well, thank you, Daniel, for aging another hour with me. And yay. I'm really glad we could together.
I got a few more wrinkles from all the laughing.
Yes. Beautiful wrinkles.
I'll blame them on you, but it's all right.
All right, everybody. Take care of yourselves and hope to see you next week.
Bye, everybody. Take care.